Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Trap Chat Presents Black History Month, Trailblazing Footprints, Writing Black History Today. Your girl is geeked out. Of course I am, because I always have phenomenal guests. But today I am joined by an Oakland, California native, a multiple time HBCU graduate, um, a radio personality, documentary filmmaker, served 16 years as pastor of Mother Bethel AME Church. By the way, he was the 52nd pastor of Mother Bethel. Also, the 15th historiographer of the AME Church, recently elected to that position at the 52nd session of the General Conference. He also has a YouTube channel, Black History on Twos. He is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, a husband, and now a Philly Bull. Welcome, Dr. Tyler.
Thanks. So glad to be here with you and looking forward to our conversation and time together.
I am as well. So I will start like we always do. Can you please share your career journey from a rough period after high school to a pivotal moment in 1987 to your current role as the 15th historiographer of the AME Church?
Oh, God, how much time do we have?
We got time.
All right. So, listen, to say that it was a rough patch out of high school is to be generous. I mean, really. So I finished high school in 1984, and I've been saying to folk lately after I watched the series Snowfall. I don't know if did you catch it? Did you catch that show?
I know about the show. I know the premise, but I have not watched it yet.
Yeah, so that show really mirrors the time, almost my exact timeline. I think the main actor, Franklin, came out of high school in 83. But the times definitely overlap where kind of the crack epidemic started in California. He was in LA, and very similar to his story. I also attended a predominantly white college prep high school, Catholic school in Oakland, that I was really forced to go to by my mother, who put me in Catholic school to keep me out of trouble, believe it or not, at an early age. But we lived in a neighborhood where all of my friends attended one of Oakland's tougher high schools, Castlemont. So all of my friends, I'd come out of school from O'Dowd and then go and hang out immediately with all my friends because that's what high school, kids do. You don't want to necessarily stand out. And so after high school, even though I graduated from O'Dowd, really found my way onto the streets of East Oakland, and right in the middle of all of that. I mean, just, all of this explosion of like drugs and violence in the mid 80s. That was my life really from like the summer of 84 until early 1986. And in 1986, after, a year and a half of that is almost like living an entire life. I've got stories upon stories that could probably fill 2 or 3 different books from that period. And I was one of the lucky ones. I mean, most of the people I know personally that went through that experience either died, were either killed, locked up, ended up on drugs for years and years and years. And I still maintain close relationships with a lot of the folk that I grew up with. And so I really counted a blessing that for me, the way out was a spiritual awakening. And that awakening happened in a lot of different ways. I won't take up, a lot of time on here talking about that, but I'll just simply say that the voices that began to speak to me as God spoke to me, it was in ways that was undeniable.
Wow.
And I joined Brookings AME Church because the only person I knew in my family that went to church all the time was my grandmother, and that was her church. Now, what I did not know at the time was because my mother we went to that church for Christmas and for Easter, and that was it, or funerals and weddings. But we didn't really have much of a church connection in our immediate family. My grandmother was the link. And so our family has been AME all the way back to the early 1800s, to the oldest ancestor that I can find. This all has come out in years of my own personal research, but like my oldest known ancestor, believe it or not, was an AME preacher born in Pennsylvania, of all places, in 1818. At
Wow.
the time, the AME Church was just getting started. So you're talking about full circle moments. I found minutes of him, for example, visiting Mother Bethel in the 1860s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, just so crazy that I had this great, family legacy that I didn't know and almost missed out on. And so that conversion experience led me to start going to college. I went to junior college in Oakland at Merritt College and Laney and Alameda. You could take classes and all the rest of them.
Mhm.
Merritt is where the Black Panther Party was started in the 60s. And one of my first professors was a former Black Panther.
Wow.
And one of the first books that I received to read was the autobiography of Malcolm X. So imagine I've got the Bible in one hand, got Malcolm's book in the other, and this experience I just lived through. And it's just, so all of this is blowing my mind, thinking, I'm the first to go through this, only to pick up this book and realize, like, oh my God, a lot of people have gone through this. And that really shaped why I wanted to go to Atlanta to go to undergrad. And so those are the formative years. And but I kind of recognized at the very beginning that I was being called to preach. And though I didn't really fully understand that, and that ultimately shaped my direction and, led me to where I am today.
I love it. Well, you do have various roles. So I want to talk about that. They include pastor, radio host, documentary filmmaker, educator, and an activist. How do these various roles complement one another and influence your commitment to the preservation of Black history?
Yeah, well, I think that they are that it's seamless, the integration with them. In fact, right now, in my new role as historiographer, I'm no longer pastoring full time. I did that for 30 years, believe it or not, from July of '94 till November of 2024. And that's just hard to believe that I literally, spent that much time as a, as a pastor every single day. And I enjoyed it, but the new role is still ministry in the AME Church, but I'm more, I guess you could call it like kind of in our executive level now. So there are 9 of us who are general officers who kind of care for various aspects of the work of the church. And so my role as historiographer is to, again, focus on the history of the AME Church, to promote it. We are in 39 countries on 5 continents. So our story is not simply an American story, but it's what the AME Church has been in South Africa, Western Africa, the Caribbean, Europe, on and on and on. And for me, to kind of answer your question, it's, I recognize that as historiographer in this moment, especially looking at what's happening in our own country, our history is really an important part of our tool belt of resistance. So as a pastor and an activist, I always felt that a part of my call was to be a part of that long lineage of people who have always resisted, white supremacy and, the attempts to dominate our people that has, has manifested itself in multiple forms. And today we're just seeing the most recent form of that, in my opinion. And so in this new job, what does the AME history say to this moment today? From our work in the Underground Railroad in the antebellum to our work electing some of the first people to office during Reconstruction, and then our work during Jim Crow and the Great Migration and the Civil Rights Movement. We have always been there from the very beginning of this country up into the present. So that's what my job is now. It is really still being an activist, community organizer, utilizing gifts that I learned from radio hosting and pastoring, but again, using it as historiographer of the AME Church.
Yeah, and then current history, all the stuff that's going on with the Proud Boys and Metropolitan now, not only winning their case, but getting ownership of anything that is Proud Boys. The AME Church is still fighting back against white supremacy.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, and you're talking about like current history and old history coming together. How about Cincinnati, Ohio recently, where you had white supremacists attempting to march through that city and intimidate Black people? Yeah. I've been actually doing a lecture this month about Cincinnati in 1829 that suffered a race riot that was worse than Tulsa in the 1920s, where the vast majority of Black people left Cincinnati never to return because of the onslaught that they suffered under. But that led to the Black Convention movement that a lot of people, it's been well documented, the Negro Convention movement that started in 1830, that started at Mother Bethel AME. And Richard Allen was the first president of that. But it started because of this, racial violence in Cincinnati. And here we are in 2025, once again, witnessing people who are threatening racial violence.
I want to stay there for just a moment and stay on the faith and activism. Those have always been pillars of many Black liberation movements. As former pastor of Mother Bethel, which is, as you said, and some people may not know, but the birthplace of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, how do Philadelphia's historic Black faith traditions shape and inspire contemporary movements for justice and equality?
Well, Philadelphia often bills itself as a city of firsts. So, the birthplace of democracy, the Declaration of Independence was literally written within a short walk from Mother Bethel. It's like 7 blocks from Mother Bethel. The Liberty Bell is 5 or 6 blocks from Mother Bethel. And Mother Bethel, the land has been owned by the AME Church since 1791. The church itself was founded in 1787. And its origin is 2 months after the Constitution was adopted. So the Constitution in September 1787, November, Richard Allen and others walk out of a segregated church where they used to be welcome, but were told because now you're Black, you have to sit in the back of the church. So this is, so you think about this city of Philadelphia and this city of first, that there's so many ways in which Philadelphia's Black stories continue to come up and give relevance. So if you think about boycotting, for example, which is a big topic right now, right? People are witnessing DEI initiatives being rolled back from major corporations and folks are saying, well, what can we do? We should boycott. That was done by Richard Allen and the early AME members in the free Black community, not just AMEs, but others in the free Black community who said, we're not going to buy goods by people who buy produce or clothing, for example, that was made by slave labor. We're going to try to hurt them economically and withhold our money, meager as it may be. Sit-ins. Richard Allen and others had to sit in Mother Bethel to prevent a white takeover by the elder of a neighboring church that believed because he was white, he could take over their building that they paid for. They literally sat in on the aisles, preventing him from getting into the pulpit. They spoke out with pamphlets and wrote about, the need to end slavery and to calling on national leaders that they actually knew to do the same. And so much of the blueprint of the things that we do today find their roots in cities like Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, these early cities that were doing the things that right now, when we see Reverend Sharpton, for example, in National Election Network out, calling for something. It's like, look, that is exactly what we've always done. And much of that started in Philadelphia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to shift just a little bit because you do also have, with your many jobs, you're also an educator. Now, with your extensive involvement in theological education, how do you prepare future faith leaders to address these contemporary issues? And what changes have you observed in how the new leaders are being prepared to address these challenges?
Sure. So I teach in a United Methodist seminary. And in that particular school over the last several years, if you've been following the news, the United Methodist Church has had a major split again. They split in 1844 over the issue of slavery. And now this big split has been over a number of issues, primarily over gender identification and human sexuality. And so a lot of the students that I come in contact with are, even within their own denomination, wrestling with, these real pressing issues that are not just simply out there around the church, but have found their way into the church. And then for the non-United Methodist students, we do have some AMEs and others as well. One of the things that I have found is that a number of students are really interested in the question around leadership. And, what is the call for clergy persons to be leaders in their community? What does that look like? Does the church sit on the side and just watch, or does the church actively get involved. And that can mean different things for different people. I mean, as an AME, there is no contradiction because our DNA is filled with it because of our founder, Richard Allen, who really kind of laid for us a blueprint. For others, it's not so crystal clear. And so my job is to really kind of help those persons who are interested in it kind of find their way. And a number of the courses that I teach now, especially with doctoral students, are courses around leadership. And so it's always just a fascinating conversation. Most of the students I deal with are people who have already pastored for some time. So they're not necessarily the Master of Divinity, younger students in their 20s. These are often students who are in their 40s and 50s and even 60s at times, who are finishing up doctoral work and have a good deal of experience with life, but still are challenged around the question of leadership.
Okay. I want to step away from the church for just a moment and then get a little bit more personal. And this is still you being the historiographer that you are. And that's your YouTube channel, Black History on Twos. And this is a show that takes a unique approach. You're riding motorcycles while uncovering forgotten Black history sites. What inspired this project, and what do you hope viewers take away from your exploration of these hidden, these hidden histories?
Oh, wow. So first of all, if people look for it and can't find it, it's Black History on Twos, because there is like a Black History in 2 minutes as well that gets, I'm like, I should have thought about that. But they just look for Black History on 2 wheels. I kind of played with it to make sure it's easier to find. So if you can't find it that way, find it this way. And what you'll see are some of the stories that I posted during the run up in the last election as I visited Underground Railroad sites nearby. This is just it's a passion of mine, riding motorcycles. I don't know if I'm more passionate about Black history than riding motorcycles. It's kind of hard to tell. So I just decided to do both together. And I mean, I ride cross country all the time. I'm always, if I'm not dressed like this, then I'm on a motorcycle going somewhere. And I would probably rather be on a motorcycle in the rain and cold than to be like nice and dry in a car, because, I've always been a part of bike life. So to find a way now to actually marry the two is really exciting. So I'm not at liberty to say just yet because it hasn't been announced, but I will tease this, that I have been selected as a fellow of a pretty prestigious group that is going to fund some of this. And at the end of my project, I'll actually have to produce a much more polished version than just my YouTube stuff that actually documents what I've done. So if you follow the channel, you'll get a chance to see the unveiling of that as well once it's announced. But I'm really looking forward to that people are going to actually invest money in this. And it'd be great to have this as like a real show at some point as well.
It is already a real show. We are calling it into existence. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So let me, all of these shows, the funniest thing is when you have like kind of other people who are involved. So I've got a nephew who rides, and he's in California. He's got a beautiful bike himself. He's like in his 40s. Then we have I have a great nephew who is interested in camera stuff. And so I really have this idea of like an uncle and 2 nephews like doing this together. Now our youngest one doesn't ride, so he'll have to be in a car just with camera equipment. But because I just, first of all, I love my nephews. And so a lot of these stories would be new to them. And I just want to see like the wow factor on their faces as we roll up to places that I kind of take for granted because I know the story. And I just think that their experience will be one that will probably resonate with a lot of other people as well. So, cross your fingers with me, then hope that they'll agree and follow me on that challenge.
Yes. That's a great segue into our final question of the main segment, reflecting on the theme, Trailblazing Footprints, Writing Black History Today, and your roles as both a historian and an active participant in current events. What role do you see yourself playing in shaping Black history narratives for future generations?
Well, listen, the thing that I want to contribute is to do as many documentaries as possible. Yeah. It's the format that people are following today. And I'm hoping that, I'm not trying to replace books because nothing can replace, the depth that writers and researchers go through. That's not necessarily my call, but mine is to really kind of whet the appetite. And then once people finish a documentary, to then go and say, I want to learn more about, A. Philip Randolph. I didn't know that he was a member of the AME Church. Or Rosa Parks, didn't know she was a member of the AME Church. Part of the body of work that I'd love to do is a piece that documents every place the AME Church has been and how it got started. For example, I spoke last week in Alabama for the AME Church there. The bishop brought me in. It was his Founders Day, so 200 plus congregations gathered. And in Alabama, Brown Chapel, where the marchers met in Selma, that sits next to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where they organized and all of that. That happened inside Brown Chapel AME Church because the pastor opened up the doors. The bombing, that tragic bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham that killed 4 little girls, one of those children was a member of the AME Church who had gone to the Baptist church with her friend or relative. And so the AMEs have been a part of each of these stories. Rosa Parks, as I said earlier, was a active member of the AME Church in Montgomery. So to have a documentary of the history of the AME Church from the 1860s to the present, and to do that in every place, Georgia and California and other places, there are so many fascinating stories. The woman who was credited with founding First AME,
AME Mason,
in Los Angeles, our biggest church out there, she was enslaved to a Mormon, to one of the main lieutenants of Joseph Smith, who founded Mormonism. She was dragged to Utah by her owner. He was advised, don't take her to California with you, but he was arrogant and took her. And she met abolitionists, sued for her freedom, got free, became wealthy, and then helped buy the land that became First AME Church. I mean, her story has to be told, right? And so all of these stories that, if I can leave anything, it would just be a body of documentaries to go along with the 5 or 6 that I've already finished. Where it's just dozens of them and the people kind of pick on them on Netflix or whatever. And I want to know more about this Freedom Church.
Yes. Thank you so much. You have shared so much in just this short time. And I hope everyone does go back and pick up some of the books, or at least go do some additional research on the many events and historical figures and contemporary figures that Reverend Tyler has mentioned. Watch his documentaries, stay on the lookout for his YouTube channel, Black History on Twos, or look up Two Wheels, because we're talking about a motorcycle. I asked him backstage if he was one of the original biker boys, but
hey, we hate that movie.
Do you? Okay.
Oh God, it's so fake. But it's super fake. The only thing real are the motorcycles.
Okay. The only thing real. Well, we're gonna leave it at that. It is Black History Month, and we're not going to get too critical on our art this month. We'll save that for March. But I do want to take some time to do the rapid fire and learn a little bit more about you, the person. Can you share a cherished Black History Month memory or tradition that shaped your understanding and appreciation of Black history and culture?
Sure. So a part of the reason I know that I was called to preach started when I joined that church in Oakland. And so I think it was in February of 1987, I was asked to be Richard Allen for the church's Black History Founders Day program. AME Founders Day is in February as well. So we kind of roll them in together. And I read Richard Allen's part, didn't even know who Richard Allen was at the time. And afterwards, everybody was like, "Oh, you've been called to preach." And I was like, "What does that mean?" So I guess that's one of my more cherished Black History Month moments, because it literally changed the direction of my life.
Okay, well, I think I know the answer to this next question. What Black historical figure gives you a glimpse of yourself?
Oh, let me think. So there's so many. I'll tell you, the person who I really resonate deeply with is a person that many people may not know, Bishop Reverdy C. Ransom. He lived kind of the mid or late 1800s to the mid 1900s. Tremendous bishop in the AME Church, but he founded a church called Greater Institutional AME Church that's still in existence in Chicago. It's kind of a trailblazer, totally out of the box. He really was there for people who are coming to Chicago who are migrants from the South, trying to
Mm.
help them like kind of get acclimated, spoke out on all kind of issues as well, and was credited with really saving the NAACP in its infancy. Before
Wow.
it was actually, remember the Niagara movement was meeting, and Du Bois says that it was at a point where people weren't really sure if it was going to be a thing. Reverend C. Ransom preached a sermon, and the sermon is what then held everybody together. And the next thing you know, it becomes NAACP. So Reverend C. Ransom, I just love his ministry, and I've really tried to model a lot of what I've done because of him.
Okay. In addition to him, who is a lesser known historical? So let's get a contemporary Black leader who inspires you and we should learn more about.
A contemporary Black leader that we should know more about. Oh man, how about Reverend Tracy Blackman? She's I always say Reverend Blackman that she's kind of like one of the modern day Martin Luther King Jr.'s, if you will. She's came out of the AME Church. She's now in the UCC Church, but really became well known during the tragedy of Mike Brown's killing in Ferguson. Her church was nearby, but Dr. Blackman is I just think she's an incredible force of nature, and a person that if you don't know who she is, you should know who she is. And you should follow her on social media and listen to a lot of what she has to say, because I think she's always right on point.
She was in that PBS documentary, wasn't she?
I'm sure she was. Skip Gates' Black Church. She had to be. Yeah.
I think she was the one that was talking about praying when they were, when the young folks were outside, and I think what resonated with me was, I believe this is the same person, but quote me correct me if I'm wrong. She said that they may not be in the church building, but God is still in them.
That sounds like something that she would say. So like I said, I saw the Skip Gates piece a couple of years ago, but that's certainly, again, she's, she and Reverend Cassandra Gould kind of summoned the rest of us to Missouri during Ferguson. And when we got there, they already had things organized, and we kind of came in to support. But just a tremendous leader in this moment, and a person that a lot of people already know. But for those who are looking for, like, who are those voices today that I should be listening to, check her out.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any books, films, or artworks related to Black history that you would recommend for listeners who are seeking to deepen their understanding?
So, you mentioned the projects that I worked on. So most of the projects that I've worked on, I've worked under the leadership of Bishop Vashti McKenzie, retired AME bishop. She's the first woman bishop elected in the AME Church. They did a series, the bishops of the church, called The Anvil. And so I was able to be the director and writer and did a lot of the lead interviews. But there are several in that series. But one in particular stands out, and these are all on YouTube now. They put them up there for free. So Echoes from the General Conference, which will tell you about kind of the way in which the AME Church has kind of operated. The other is AME Next, which talks about where the church is going. But my favorite project, and one I think that people would really enjoy, is The Spirit of African Methodism. So it speaks a lot to not just our history, but the ethos, the culture of who we are. It's more global in vision. So you hear voices from around the globe. And I guess one of the more personal things is that we were able to interview, before he was killed, the Reverend Clementa Pinckney, the pastor of Mother Emanuel. And so we actually interviewed him on a fluke for a different project that we were going to do on the history of the AME Church of South Carolina the year before he was killed, with his other members in his church at that Bible study. And so we were able to go back to his family and get their blessing to include it into this project, since we had it. And he opens it and he closes it. And to me, it's just so powerful. If you knew Reverend Pinckney, he just has such an aura about him, just such a way of delivery. And it's just, telling you, it's a great project, but it's made even more special because of him. Spirit of African Methodism.
Thank you for that. I will definitely be checking it out, and I encourage any listeners or viewers to do the same. So how can we actively, and I'm saying this intentionally, actively participate in honoring and preserving Black history beyond the month of February?
Well, listen, I mean, we are in a moment where you literally have the president of the United States on the one hand saying, "Oh, I'm going to sign a proclamation for Black history, proclaiming this is Black History Month," and then on the exact same day, directing that there's no Black History Month to be celebrated in federal buildings on work time. Like, how? It's just, I mean, you cannot make this up, right? The idea that somehow the military should not talk about the Tuskegee Airmen as a part of their orientation and training is just, listen, the federal government has typically been the place that has led when it comes to pushing the country forward, whether it was in the military or in other parts like the post office and places like that. And so to see this attack on it and to try to roll it back is it's just very regrettable. And so that being said, right now, everybody should become a teacher of Black history. And, so be a student first, and then what you learn, pass it on to someone else. That it doesn't matter what, a president says or a company says, nobody can stop us from teaching our own story. This has been the power of the Black church from the very beginning, the independent Black church. Richard Allen had a chance to go with the Anglican Church, the Church of England, which evolved into what we call the Episcopal Church today. But Allen wanted his own space, as he said, a place, our own vine and fig tree, where we can worship under our own vine and fig tree, recognizing that it's not just about worship, but it's also about carving out this sacred space where in times like this, we can bring people in. I've been encouraging churches to open up Saturday schools or freedom schools and teach Black history, not just to Black people, but to everybody. There are many white people who are just as offended by what the president said as Black people. And they too want their children to learn a more comprehensive story of the American story. As I said in the beginning, the AME Church was founded 2 months after the Constitution and several blocks from the Constitution being adopted. That means that there is not a time in this country's history that we have not been here. And if we have been here all that time, then there's always been Black history in America. And obviously, Black people predate the AME Church. But if you just want to be technical about it, you cannot talk about any period of American history without our story being included. So we can't let it be whitewashed. We can't let it be erased. We can't let it be banned. So teach it yourself, share it on social media, pass on videos and book recommendations and everything else. Let's get our story told.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned social media, because my next question is, how has social media influenced the dissemination and the documentation of Black history and culture?
Oh, it's great. I mean, listen, I know there are a lot of reasons that we could be critical of, things like Meta and X and everything else. But the one thing about it is that, people are there, and it's still largely free and available. And I say, take the good that you can in places like that and use it for those positive messages. So let's, utilize it, because so as I said earlier, we are a denomination of 39 countries. Prior to social media, trying to keep up with one another meant only seeing each other in actual meeting spaces. But the fact that I'm in touch with what's going on in Johannesburg through people like my friend Reverend Thabo Klaas, right? And so if something's happening there, Thabo can send it to me and I can share it instantly here and get support. And likewise, what's happening here, they can find out as well. And when you're talking about our history as well, then it's a game changer being able to just share these stories. So I love it.
All right. What is your go-to songs, or music genre when you want to hype yourself up to conquer the day?
Oh, I started this morning off with a whole Kendrick Lamar playlist. So I started from like Stumble Up all the way down to All Right by the time I got to my destination in an hour. And I like music with a meaning and with purpose. So a lot of my friends who are my age don't understand Kendrick because they just haven't taken the time to look at the lyrics and to actually hearing hip hop in your 50s is different than it was because everybody speaks differently. But as I said to some folk, I'm like, hey, listen, he's basically like Chuck D and KRS-One rolled into one.
Yeah.
And his beef is NWA and Ice Cube or Pac and Biggie. And they're like, oh, I get that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. That's exactly. This is not new, right?
No.
So it's like, but like we just have to understand the moment. So for me, it could be that, or it could be Honey in the Rock, right?
Sweet Honey in the Rock, yes.
And listening to to their music, or sometimes it's gospel. It just depends. I don't like commercial stuff, overly commercialized, where there's overly commercialized like pop music, and that's a lot of what gospel is today, unfortunately.
Bring back choirs.
Bring back music with a message, you know what I mean? As opposed to giving me like 3 words that you're going to hit me over the head with for like 7 minutes, right? Yeah. So like I want a message, and so I listen to music that has a message.
I love it. So now I'm going to have to go listen. I'm going to have to go listen to the current Kendrick album because I want to squabble up too. I want to get right. Right. What's the best piece of career advice you received that you would give your younger or your early career self?
Oh, wow. So I would say I'll borrow a phrase from the late Bishop Richard Franklin Norris, who actually sent me to Mother Bethel. And so Bishop Norris would often say, wear it like a loose garment. He talked, this was like, like some great sage advice. And so if you have an idea or you have a vision, something you're locked into, he'd say, wear it like a loose garment. In other words, be focused as you can, but understand that life sometimes will send you in a different direction. And you can't be so inflexible that you miss opportunities. A lot of what, I intended when I went into a Ph.D. program back in 2000, when I entered, my goal was to be the president of one of our theological schools, one of our seminaries.
Oh.
Yeah, that never happened. But what actually did happen has been so much more fulfilling and just so much more mind-blowing, right? So when the first thing didn't come through, if I just stayed there and kind of waited for that, it's not to say it may not have ever happened, but going with the flow instead and being flexible has just opened up just so many doors for me that I just never even thought possible.
I love that. And I'm going to write that down. Wear it like a loose garment. I needed that word today. Thank you. And rest in peace, Reverend Norris, Bishop Norris.
Yeah, the 50th pastor of Mother Bethel, by the way.
50th pastor of Mother Bethel. Yes. Okay. Sorry. It just brings back, Reverend Norris is very special in our family's life as well. So I just want to, sorry, that's why I'm cheesing real big. Anywho. If you wrote a book about your career so far, what would the title be?
Oh, I don't know. How about Unfinished Business?
I like it.
I've got a whole series of sermons off of that topic. And
okay.
I just kind of feel like there's, I was talking to someone. So in this new role in the AME Church, you have to retire at 75. So if I stay in this role, and if I'm reelected every 4 years until retirement, I've got 15 years to pretty much do whatever I can do in it. So I'm like, man, that is like the projects. If you saw my like project board of things that I want to accomplish in that period of time, it's like, I don't even know if I can do it in 15 years. Right. And so I just feel like there's just so much that's unfinished. So when people say, oh man, you've done all these things, I'm thinking like, what are you talking about? I haven't even done half of the stuff that I want to do. So it just feels like I've got this unfinished business.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And are you wearing it like a loose garment? Because it sounded real schmedium. It sounded a little tight.
No, it's not tight. It's just, but again, I think it's okay to put pressure on yourself to be intense about like your goals. And so wearing it like a loose garment is not to say you have to like kind of just be so cool about it. Like if it happens, it doesn't happen. But I tend to be intense about things, and especially when I kind of set my mind to do something. And but like I said, the documentaries, like I may not finish as many as I want, but to find the funding to do some of these programs, and then to also just find other ways of, working with the AME churches. I learned how to be a preservationist on the job as as a pastor. In 30 years, I served 5 of the 7 churches I served. 5 of them were the first Black churches in their communities.
Oh, wow.
And so as a result, several of them had very, very old buildings. I think at least 3 of them were built in the 1800s. So, and so that meant that I had to learn about, you can't just call any plumber, can't just call any painter to do certain things in these kind of buildings. And you had to teach yourself and learn with the help of others how to be a preservationist. So part of what I really want to bring as well as in my portfolio is support for all these churches out here that are also struggling with preservation needs, and to connect them with foundations and architects and engineers who can be resources for them. So, I mean, the documentaries are great, but like, again, people have real building needs. And then beyond the buildings, it's also the storytelling. Some of these places have churches that should have a museum because they have such powerful stories. I mean, Brown Chapel, as I said, at Selma, like people should have, that should be a tourist destination
like
to
Mother
go
Bethel.
to that church. Right. Yeah. Mother Bethel has a great museum, but like that model that Mother Bethel has should be replicated in multiple places. So so again, like I said, my to-do list on my board, I don't know. If I can get to a 10th of what's up there, I'll be happy at the end. We
will as well. I have truly been blessed by this conversation, and I don't say that lightly. I don't say that just because you are a pastor, or excuse me, a man of God and a member of the general board of the AME Church. I say that to what I call my hood rat friends as well. Because everybody that has been on has just been amazing. Can you please, before we get out of here, tell folks where they can find you, where they can follow your work? You can share any of the upcoming projects or documentaries or media things that you're going to be involved in, so that folks know where they can consume them.
Sure. So the best way to follow me right now is just really at Mark Kelly Tyler. So that's my social media handle across platforms. Try to keep it simple, so it's easy to find, and that's MarkKellyTyler. So at Mark Kelly Tyler. And that will usually kind of signal you to everything else, because what I do on other platforms that's not tagged that way, I'll post on Facebook or on Blue Sky or wherever. I know the Blue Sky is kind of new right now, so everybody's still trying to get used to that. But I'll be using that more, and Instagram as well.
All right. Thank you so much again for your time. And everyone else, please come back for the next episode of Trap Chat, Black History Month, Trailblazing Footprints, Writing Black History Today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.